My lords, the impact of fly tipping is grave wherever it occurs. It blights local communities and the environment, and tackling fly tipping is a government priority.
Over half of local authorities have not had one successful prosecution for fly tipping.
It's a blight on our environment. It's a source of pollution, a danger to public health, and a hazard to wildlife. And the bad news is, it's increasing.
Growing up in London, fly tipping was not an unusual sight to see. In recent years, however, I have spent a lot of time in the countryside. But the forests and fields are as much of a dumping ground for people's waste as the streets of London are. After the first national lockdown in the UK, I started volunteering for the London Wildlife Trust and learned to appreciate the importance of our natural landscape. This made me want to learn more about fly tipping and why it is such a big problem in the UK, with over 1 million reports in 2019 and an increase in reports every year since 2013. Fly tipping is everywhere, so I went out to ask the public if they know what fly tipping is and the effects that it has. We're filming. So what do you know about fly tipping?
Not a great deal.
It's people that can't be asked to take their rubbish to the dump.
And it seems to be happening more and more.
Fly tipping tends to be on the margins of the cities usually and out into the countryside.
People go out into the countryside and dump it on farmers' fields and things and leave them to clear it up.
Does it shock you to hear that it costs a taxpayer £60 million a year to clean up?
Jesus, wow.
Yes, it does. It's incredible. I mean, how they could do such a lot with that.
That's pretty shocking, yeah.
Yeah, so the government should do, something to prevent that.
Yeah, it is shocking, but not surprising.
After interviewing the public, I found that despite some knowledge, they did not understand the extent of the problem. So in order to find out more, I decided to contact Anna from the London Wildlife Trust to learn more about the effects of fly tipping from someone who has to deal with it on a daily basis.
Hi, I'm Anna. I work for London Wildlife Trust on the Brilliant Butterflies project, where I'm a nature reserves officer.
What are your experiences with fly tipping?
So unfortunately we do get a lot of fly tipping on our sites, especially on our nature reserves. They are often quite secluded sites, so we tend to get large loads of domestic waste and garden waste dumped a lot around the fringes of the nature reserves. We had one reserve where people had dumped a lot of kind of domestic waste, and there was things like Pringle tubes, and a fox cub got caught in a Pringle tube and had died because it starved to death because it couldn't get its head out. So rubbish dumped like that as well can have a real impact on the wildlife.
How does it affect your job and you personally?
It makes me really angry because, in my opinion, fly tipping is an extremely exclusively selfish act. It's people who can't be bothered to clear away their own waste, don't want to take responsibility for their own waste. It can be quite hard work, and it can be dangerous depending on the type of waste. So there's much better things that we could be doing to try and improve the sites for wildlife and nature conservation rather than clearing up rubbish.
How can we stop this problem?
So I think it's a really difficult problem to try and eradicate completely, but it's about getting out into local communities, educating people, getting them onto the site so that they can see it, so that they don't see it as a place that can just be used as a rubbish tip. And if they've got to spend all this money on clearing up after selfish people who can't be bothered to take responsibility for their own waste, then that kind of knock-on effect, there's less money to be spent on natural areas and people can't get out and enjoy them. So there should be harsher punishments, I think. More of a deterrent, larger fines.
Interviewing Anna led me to further pursue how we can prevent this problem. So I called Merton Council to arrange an online interview with Chris Lee, Director of Environment for my borough, hoping to find out if the council are doing anything to curb the upward trend of fly tipping cases.
My name's Chris Lee, and I'm Director of Environment and Regeneration at Merton Council.
So the maximum fine for a small-scale fly tip is £400. Do you agree that this should be higher to further act as a deterrent?
The fine levels for those industrial scale tippers where they are making a living out of this should certainly be much higher, and we need to make an example out of those to deter them. Householders do need to take care. They do need to be responsible about what they do with their waste and who they allow to carry it and take it away. if your waste is dumped and we can track it back to you, you'll be held responsible.
So what more do you think we can do to prevent it? Does it start with education?
It certainly does, yeah. And when we send our enforcement staff into schools to talk to school kids and to get that message, they're often very good in terms of getting that message back to their parents and making sure that that's built in at an early age. What we're trying to do is make a very visible statement about the fact that we're taking it seriously and we are going to take action.
What could the money be spent on instead of cleaning up all this waste?
The scale of the problem, it costs us around over $500,000 per annum to pay for the cost of, or to pay for the collection and disposal of this type of waste. $500,000 a year would pay for an additional probably 15 teachers per annum, 15 social workers, 15 people out there doing good things in the borough, or a reduction in the council tax bill for the council taxpayer.
Fly tipping is a national pandemic for our wildlife and environment, and after interviewing experts on the subject, it's clear to me that we must demand higher fines for criminals who fly tip, as well as a solid foundation of education in waste and recycling for young people to stop the problem early on. I believe it could also be that an increase in fly tipping is a stark indication of our growing need for material objects. As a final takeaway, I implore you to recycle where possible, repair, don't replace, and give more thought to conservation rather than consumption.